Hello and welcome to the first digital graphics video podcast. My name is Sam and I will be your host. In these podcasts, I hope to cover a broad range of topics, all with an emphasis on helping you with the nuances that are involved with making digital files that are press ready. So without further ado, let's get started. Today I want to begin by talking about using black in Adobe Photoshop. Now, I will be using Adobe Photoshop CS3 in this podcast, but this information pertains to all flavors of any of the Adobe software. Now, if you notice down in my foreground and background colors down here in the corner, when I hit the letter D on the keyboard, it will bring my colors back to Photoshop black and white default swatches. Looks like black, doesn't it? Well, if this was only going to be viewed on a television or on the web, this black would be perfectly acceptable to use. However, this isn't what we're using Photoshop for. If you click on that black swatch and look at this color's CMYK values over here, you'll notice that it doesn't contain just black. In fact, it contains all four of the colors: cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Why does this matter, you ask? Well, it all comes down to how your job is going to be printed. So let's take a look at that. This is one of our presses. This is our Honsho heat set web press that we have. And on a printing press, your photo will be broken down into its four separate color channels: cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. So that would be one of them would go here, one of them would go here, one of them would go here, and one of them would go here. They'll be placed on drums that will be inked with each of these specific colors. If you're using a Photoshop black, as you saw in the swatch color values, the black Photoshop wants you to use would put the black on every single one of these drums. So what would happen if one of these channels happens to get a tiny bit shifted when it goes through the press? Your Photoshop black text would end up looking something like this. This would be what would happen if your cyan plate and your magenta plate were off by maybe not even a 1/16 of an inch. You'd end up having multiple colors showing up on what was supposed to be just black text. That's why changing the value manually in Photoshop to remove the other colors and setting black to only 100% black is necessary. It allows for your black objects to only have to be placed on the paper in one shot rather than in four separate passes. Now let's talk about rich blacks. Rich blacks is a term used to describe adding additional color to the 100% black ink that we just talked about previously. 100% black in Photoshop should always be used when dealing with small text. That would be any text that's under or around 20 points in size, which if you look on the text tool would be right here. Anything below 20 should be only 100% black. However, there are other times when adding additional ink from other channels can help make your work look better. A typical rich black mixture might be something like 100% black ink. Let's pull this up. 100% black ink and 60% cyan with nothing in the magenta or yellow channel. Another variation that would be acceptable is if you do the 100% black, 60% cyan, and you add 20% magenta and 20% yellow to it. Now in Photoshop it will look sort of a bluish color. As you can see, it's even in the blue spectrum over here. But this actually is a rich black. While in theory an even richer black could be made by making all of these 100, but what will end up happening is you will dramatically increase the time it will take for your paper to dry if you've got 100% ink coverage on every single plate. This would make you have to pay more, as the job would take longer on the press because they would actually have to sit the paper over and wait for it to dry in order to flip it over to print the other side. 400% black should never ever be used for a printing job. Another reason that you should use rich blacks, though, for small areas of black is to avoid trapping issues. Rich black is often used for large text such as 36 point or higher, so anything over 36 point or higher, printed over a picture or colored background, because otherwise any slight misregistration between those printing plates that I showed you would produce a white or colored halo around the text, making it much harder to read. The problem with all these blacks is that they won't all look the same. Oh, they all look the same on the computer screen. All of them are represented as in red, green, blue values, which is R. It would show up as R0, G0, and B0, but they won't look the same when they're printed. A classic beginner's mistake is to take a Photoshop image that has black around the outside of it and then add a different black to it. If you look at the channels in Photoshop, you can easily tell that while on the screen the result looks fine, but when it goes to the press, the ink distribution will easily be noticeable on the finished piece. So if I open up the channels here, you can see this piece looks like it's all the same color. But if you go down here to Channels, which is also available under Window, Channels, right here, you can see that if you turn off your other channels, cyan has these values in it. The magenta has these values in it. The yellow has these values in it. And the black has this values. So as you can see, the blacks will look very different on the press because all of them have different amounts of cyan, magenta, yellow, and black in them. If you're unsure of what black is being used, you have two different tools at your disposal that you can use to check it. If you hover above the document, you can look at the info dialog box, which is over here, normally labeled with Navigator and histogram. If you click on info, you can see the CMYK value right here. As I pass over it, you can see that it changes, as I showed you in the channels earlier. So all those values are different, so they will all print differently. The info is also available by going up to Window and choosing Info from your drop-down box. So that way, if this happens to get closed, you can always go back to Window, Info, and it will pop it back up. The other option that you have to start looking for colors or to try and match a color is your eyedropper tool. The eyedropper is down here in your toolbar. No matter what version of Adobe Photoshop you're using, it will always look like this. If you click that and then choose an area on your photo that you want to look at the color value, you can click it and then choose your foreground swatch. This is the color value that you just selected with your eyedropper. As you can see, when I move around, it will change the values over here. Always try to make your blacks match. It may not always be noticeable on screen, but you will definitely notice it when you get to your finished piece. Well, that's all for this week's episode. I hope this has helped you out, and I'll see you next episode.